Okay, great. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this informational webinar. My name is Dr. Laura Pereira. I'm a project management team lead at TEPHINET. I work with Elena Atkinson, Dr. Angela Hilmers, our Director of Strategic and Technical Initiatives at TEPHINET, and also Dr. Francisco Everhoff at Abbott on this FETP Fellowship initiative. The purpose of this webinar is to provide those interested with an opportunity to learn more about the award, the application process, and to ask any questions that you might have. The deadline, as you may have seen, for letters of interest was recently extended, now until October 31st. We invite you to apply. We invite your questions. With that, though, I'll first pass it over to Elena to facilitate next steps. And of course, Angela and Francisco, if you would like to briefly introduce yourselves, please do so.
Sure. Would you like to introduce yourself first, Angela?
Sure. Thank you, Elena. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Angela Hilmers. I'm the Director of Strategic and Technical Initiatives at TEPHINET, and we are really excited to offer this opportunity to all of you to support you on implementing research activities or operational research activities in your countries. And with this partnership with Abbott, if you have seen the call, you have seen that there's tons of opportunities for you to not only do your investigations or implement your investigations, but also to write papers, to participate in panels, communities of practice, and so on. So we're really happy, and I'm glad Francisco has also joined us.
Hey.
Thanks.
Hi, Francisco. I don't know if you can hear us. There we go. Would you like to
can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, so just to introduce myself, thank you for this opportunity to join this call. So I'm Francisco Everhoff, formerly at CDC. I've been with Abbott for about 9 months now, and I work as the medical director for infectious diseases research. And one of the main projects we're developing is the Abbott Pandemic Defense Coalition, which is a network of sites throughout the world to really set up pathogen discovery, as well as doing other public health work, mostly, of course, around infectious diseases. And through this connection with the task force and TEPHINET, and again, it's been great getting to know Angela and others very well. This hatched this idea of a fellowship to support up to 10 fellows throughout the world working on these topics. And it should be a learning experience. It should also really help us do our work in really furthering the network and strengthening it. Again, our network, by the way, Abbott is largely very strong in laboratory and diagnostics. And this is really a first venture into epidemiology and linking those skills. So I think it's really a great opportunity and a bit of a unique work in this network. Most of this kind of pathogen discovery is really lab-based, but this should have a very solid link to epidemiology and public health. So we're very excited to be a part of this. Thank you.
Great introduction, Francisco. And then I'll go last. My name is Elena Atkinson. I work directly with Angela and Laura. I'm TEPHINET's scientific coordinator, so I'll help coordinate a lot of the logistics of these kinds of events. And you might see me sending out emails or social media posts or anything. So I'm just kind of helping coordinate all of this. And so I see we've got a few more answers in the chat. We've got people calling in from Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Niger, Uganda, and Burkina Faso. And of course, Vijay from India and Bangladesh. All right, so we've got a lot of countries on the call. I'll go ahead and share my screen again so we can go over the call for the letters of intent. So what we wanted to go over today is to explain the different stages of the application process. we wanted to make the application process as easy as possible for everybody. So the step one is not to do your full application and all this information. The step one is just to send us a letter. And that's what we're calling the letter of intent. And that's pretty much just a one-page letter that says that you're interested. So hopefully that should be an easy step. And then if you fulfill all the criteria, then you'll be asked to give a little bit more information. So let's go over the letter of intent instructions so we can get that first step going. So if you've seen on TEPHINET or LinkedIn or any of our other email blasts that Amber's been sending out, you'll see this document that you've already seen before. And basically just describing the Abbott Pandemic Defense Coalition. So when we talk about APDC, that's the Abbott Pandemic Defense Coalition. And this is what Francisco was mentioning. This arose, Francisco, correct me if I'm wrong, it arose after COVID, right? As a response.
Actually, no. Actually, this was an extension of Abbott's been doing work for the last 25, 26 years or so in surveillance for hepatitis, HIV, and different bloodborne pathogens. So it was sort of an outgrowth of that. And through that, they discovered new viruses. So even before COVID, this was in the works. We actually decided to postpone it because it seemed not logical to launch this right as COVID was taking off. So the timing was good, but maybe too good.
Yeah. Interesting. So yeah, basically the goals of this initiative are all around what Francisco was mentioning, future pandemic threats. So we want to either detect them, respond to them, just basically prevent another COVID or any other pandemic that we've seen in the past. And also, as Francisco mentioned, it's a learning opportunity, so expanding to technical professional development opportunities. And also we want to strengthen collaboration between FETPs and just strengthen all kinds of capacity, epidemiology capacity, laboratory capacity. So that's the goals. Jumping over to the money, the money is all provided by Abbott, and it's $10,000 max for every grantee. And then all projects will run from January 15th to August 31st. And you can only submit one letter of interest. So this is the extension that Laura had mentioned earlier. We're extending this all the way up to the end of the month. So what you have now is about 2 extra weeks to submit your letter of intent. And how do you do that? You just click on the TEPHINET website. And this is the webinar that we're at. The criteria are very wide, very broad, pretty much any FETP resident or trainee. The only requirement is that you can't have another TEPHINET grant currently. And even if you're a recent graduate, you can apply as long as you have the backing of your FETP program director. And the FETP has to be the principal investigator. And you do have to identify an in-country subject matter expert. And the subject matter expert has to be affiliated with either the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, an Abbott site, National Public Health Institution, academic institution. So the subject matter expert has to have some kind of affiliation with an organization in your country. And Abbott can help you to find appropriate mentors, but you do have to mention a mentor in your letter, otherwise you won't be considered. And you do have to make sure that you have some kind of network in your country to conduct your proposed project with, and then also make sure that they're on board. There are APDC member institutions. So I don't know, Francisco, would you like to talk a little bit about the APDC countries and member institutions?
Yes, no, sure. So first of all, there are about 11 sites now throughout the world in 11 countries, and actually not 11 countries, less countries than that, but in 5 continents. We have 2 sites in Brazil, University of Sao Paulo and Fiocruz. In India, we have YRG. It's an NGO focused on HIV, and we have a great collaborator there. We have a site in Zimbabwe, Senegal, Colombia, Thailand, South Africa, Georgia, and in the Caribbean, West Indies. Now, you don't have to have a site in your country. We're looking at supporting regional work. So if you don't have one of these sites in your country, you could develop kind of a proposal and work with mentors in the country and the Ministry of Health and universities and develop your proposal that way up to the point of pathogen discovery. Then we can help with, helping to get those specimens tested, for example. So I think it's kind of like, don't worry as much about the actual lab part, but everything up front. Can you help develop where we identify patients, where we collect the right specimens, things like that? And then we can help a lot on the actual testing of it. Because this does, pathogen discovery almost by definition requires sophisticated diagnostics, next generation sequencing, metagenomics, whole generation sequencing. So we can help with that element of it, but it's the other parts that you guys have to, work on. And again, we're happy to, and we also would encourage, again, this kind of regional approach. It doesn't have to be in country by any means. It makes it easier in a way, but it's not an absolute.
Great, thank you for that. So yeah, to continue what Francisco was saying, your project should have certain characteristics. It's not just a free grant. The project must focus on pathogen discovery and response and surveillance. So the projects could focus on setting up or establishing surveillance systems if none exist already for a certain pathogen. It could either be emerging or re-emerging. Also, your project could include designing and conducting surveys, for example, cross-sectional, longitudinal, or case studies of patients with illnesses of a novel or unknown etiology. You could also, in your project, work with clinics, hospitals, or laboratories to establish data banks with specimen and for specimen and data collection. Or you could use existing specimen banks from any kind of institution, a clinic, hospital, laboratory, and you could coordinate the shipment or the selection of samples, assays, and specimens to Abbott. And then also we may consider others. But as you can see, a lot of them are focused on new pathogens, unknown pathogens, or laboratory logistics, making sure that the right specimens are shipped and tested. And what will you get if you win an award? You first get scientific writing training. So we're very interested in that your results get published. So we'll give you a lot of scientific writing training. There'll be a continuous journal club to foster interactions between everybody. I don't know if you haven't participated in one already. It's usually where you get together once a week or once every so often, and you read novel articles that are coming out in your field and you discuss them. We will also provide conference travel so that you can travel to conferences and present your results. And then finally, a community of practice, which would be a group, probably online, where you are able to share your experiences with others and learn from others' experiences. And then, of course, the $10,000 would be the other support that you get. But these would be the activities that you get. So hopefully they would help you really disseminate your findings and share what you're discovering. So that's about it. We have our first question. If you'd like, we can jump straight into the questions because I think that's the most valuable part of the webinar, that we're all here together and you can ask us these kinds of questions. So Vijay is asking, can he propose to do a sero survey using archived samples?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, I think that's, of course, fine. I mean, it's unrealistic in a way to really pull off a new sero survey from scratch during the time period allotted and with the funding. So that would be one option. Another option is to link with ongoing sero surveys or planned sero surveys already, and maybe taking an additional specimen, for example. So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, great. We have another question from Dr. Sanjeev. Can we select facilities from medical colleges?
Absolutely. That would not be an issue at all. That'd be probably encouraged.
Okay, just answered. All right. So does the testing of, if this is a sero survey, does it have to be tested at an APDC site only, or any site with a capacity to do this testing?
Yeah, I think we would welcome the ability to link with other sites. We'd want to, there's ways we can work to ensure the quality of that, sending blind panels, for example. But yes, that's absolutely okay to do.
Great. Another question. So Bernadette.
Oh, sorry.
Bernadette graduated in January 2020. So it will be over 2 years by January 2022. Is she still eligible?
I mean, I think I would say yes. I mean, I'm going to defer that to you all. You guys know your FETP programs and stuff, but from my perspective, I think it would be fine. But I'll defer Angela, others. You guys want to comment on that?
I think we had said at the time of application.
Yeah, I think it according to the criteria we have said, she will qualify. So she will be still in training, I suppose. But it's still, it's part of the criteria we defined that she will qualify for the grant.
So I'm going to say as long at the time of the application. And Bernadette, just to make sure that also you have the support of your program director. So if you are a graduate, you do have to have the support. So Denise said hello from Kigali. So do APDCs have any sites in Rwanda?
No, there's no site in Rwanda. We will have, I think, coming up a site in Uganda and a site in South Africa. So one of the things to consider also, I think this kind of highlights that, I should have mentioned it before, is if you are in a country that doesn't have a site and doesn't have capacity for testing, one of the things we'd like you to explore in your application and your letter of intent is, do you have the ability to actually export specimens for testing outside of the country? That would be important. If some countries, they don't, or you're not able to work that out, then we wouldn't be able to do, for example, pathogen discovery if you don't have the capacity in the country and you don't have the ability to export specimens. So I think it's something that should be specifically addressed in countries that don't have an APDC site.
So it looks like somebody was asking if they could apply without a letter of support.
Yeah, and I think I answered that. We are looking for a letter of support if the applicant is a fellow. So we would like a letter of support from their program director. But if the applicant has left their FETP program and it is a recent grad working for a ministry, we are not requesting as a mandatory supporting document a letter from an FETP director because they are no longer connected with their program. So there are other requirements there in terms of being able to identify a mentor from the ministry. That is important. And there are others about the APDC site, PI as well as part of the team. But the supporting letter from the FETP program director is required for fellows applying, but not required from applicants who are recent grads.
I think we did. We said within 2 years, they have to apply with the support of the program director.
Yeah, but that might be an oversight because I know sometimes fellows or recent grads will leave their program and work somewhere else, and maybe difficult to reach out the program director at that time. So I would say we'll be more flexible with that specific requirement. However, if the fellow is in training, we need permission from their program director. We need for them to support the fellow to apply.
So basically you need the support in either case. But if you're a current trainee, you don't need the letter.
Well, I think the FETP, your program director, would need to support the program. So one of the things that's implicit in all of this is you need institutional support. An individual person in whatever country, a recent current FETP or recent graduate cannot possibly do this work unless they're linked with hospitals, the Ministry of Health, you know, an institution that can, you know, you can work with that would be supportive of doing this kind of work. Otherwise, it's just really not possible. So there does need to be a link to reputable institutions in the country, including the FETP program, ministries, you know, universities, things like that.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to add on the website that has the call, there is a link to instructions for the letter, providing the letter of intent, which lists all these details that Angela just mentioned about the types of letters that you would need to support, exactly the type of information that you should include in your letter of intent, how to apply for it. It's important that the application be submitted through our TEPHINET website and not via email. And to be able to do that, you just need to have an account set up with the TEPHINET website. And again, there are instructions thank you, Elena, contained in here that guide you on how to set up that account if you don't already have one set up. But as always, us at TEPHINET are here to answer any questions that you may have, and you can email us with those questions as well after this call anytime.
Great. We have a few questions also. I want to do wastewater surveillance for hepatitis A, E, and polio. Would this be a good idea?
I mean, it certainly, we'd be open to something like that, of course. There has to be, if you will, let's say a public health purpose for it, okay? So again, kind of the overarching is new pathogens. However, it's okay to study, you know, current and existing pathogens. In fact, you almost have to, because you can't identify a new pathogen until you've ruled out the endemic ones first. You know, you're not going to do metagenomics on every single specimen. You want to make sure they don't have hepatitis, they don't have COVID, they don't have XYZ. So I think yes, the answer would be yes, we'd be open to it, but you have to think carefully about what would be the public health importance and impact of it, not just collecting specimens and testing without, you know, a reason for it, if you will.
Okay, I'm going to send that. Thank you, Francisco. And then besides Uganda and South Africa, what other neighbor countries have an APDC?
Are you talking about in Africa?
Yes, I'm guessing Southern Africa.
Yeah, so South Africa, but it's by the way, the institute in South Africa that we're working with has been doing COVID surveillance throughout the continent. So they have a well-established linkages to most countries. So I think the South Africa center could probably serve as a hub for much of Africa. We also have a center in Senegal, and we're in the process of signing up one in Uganda. So should have pretty good coverage in that part of the world. But again, it's not necessary to have one in your country.
Okay, great. We've got a lot of questions in the chat as well. So I think we did that question. Is there any like list of disease priorities that Abbott or that TEPHINET has in mind that we would prefer? projects focus on?
Yeah, so I can answer. Again, the backbone or foundation of this network is surveillance for identification of new pathogens. That being said, we recognize that doesn't happen all the time. So I think studying diseases of endemic importance for a country are fine. I think COVID, certainly there's still a lot to learn about COVID. Doing work in respiratory infections and pathogens is certainly okay. It was mentioned hepatitis as well. So I think we're open to any potential disease of interest. So this is the first time we're doing this. So for all of us, it's a learning experience. So we have to kind of keep that in mind as well. But something that's meaningful and valuable to the country or to the world is, of course, would be a priority. But we are open to endemic diseases as well. Over.
So Sophia has a question also. Could they explore secondary data from the animal quarantine office?
I think we'll entertain good scientific proposals. I mean, that's a very general statement. But I think if it's a quality proposal, we would certainly entertain it. Angela, I saw you smiling. Do you have any thoughts?
Yes, I think one conversation we had with Abbott is in terms of, as Francisco is saying, this is a very new opportunity and they are pretty open to support this type of activities. If following the One Health approach. What I'm meaning is that we are not limited to epi and on human surveillance, but also animal. Obviously, zoonotic diseases are important. I know that part of our network is comprised of FETP with a vet track. We have veterinarians as well being trained. So if you guys are doing an investigation on a zoonotic disease of importance in your country, I think that also will be welcome if you want to propose something and do testing as well. As soon as it shows public health impact, and you can demonstrate that your investigation or your proposal is meaningful in response to priorities from the Ministry of Health and Agriculture. That's why we have included Ministry of Agriculture as one of the institutions in the call.
Great. So somebody was asking to see the selection criteria again. And then somebody was also asking, can I make use of the samples in our biobank for this project? And yes, that's actually one of the activities that we mentioned. You can utilize existing specimen banks and either plan or coordinate how to get those tested. So then let's go back to the instructions. So maybe we can go over that since everybody seems excited, ready to send in their letter. As we mentioned, the letter has to be sent in 2 weeks by the end of the month, and it's just a one-page description. So put your title, you, the principal investigator, your name and affiliation, and then also put all of the collaborators that we've been talking about. So as Francisco mentioned, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for you to just do this on your own. So we need to make sure that you have some kind of institutional support. You would need to have a subject matter expert, and then an institution or a laboratory that you will conduct this project with. And then just a description of your project, the goals and the main objectives, the kind of ethics that are involved around data and human subject involvement, and then reporting. Also, we would like you to just send us your resume, your CV, a letter of support from your mentor, also your mentor's CV, and then this is the letter of support. I think some people were asking about that. I'm not sure if this was the letter of support that people were asking about. But yes, the letter of support from the site saying that they will collaborate with you. So yeah, no more than 2 pages, 1 page for the letter, 1 page for the summary. And then that's it. This is what it would look like. So this is just a letter. You say, you address it to TEPHINET and just describe that you from your country have interest in applying for this. And then here's your summary. So 500 words, pretty easy to do. So I'll leave this up here so you can look over what we're expecting. And then, oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add one more. I kind of thought back about the specimen banks. And again, with specimen banks, you're not going to be really, you have to think of the kind of pathogens. For example, if it's specimens from a blood bank, you wouldn't expect people with acute, acute disease to be in there. So you'd be looking at things like chronic infections, like hepatitis, HIV, those kind of elements. If you have a specimen bank that's banked people who had, I don't know, dengue fever, or something, or were undiagnosed acute infections, then you might be doing, acute pathogen, looking for new emerging pathogens or new acute infections. So it has to flow logically when you're thinking about it. You have to think about the biological plausibility of your specimens and what data do you have. Just random testing specimens without any kind of demographic data, epidata, background, I think it would be a stretch a bit. So be thinking about it critically. So do think about it in terms of a research project, if you will. Over.
Then we had a question from Philip, working on insect vectors and graduating any moment. So yes, please, we would love for you to apply, and you can be current FETP, any current FETP or recent graduate if you have the support of your program director. So if you're currently still training, we would love to have an application from you. All right, and then we had another question. Does the project actually start December 15th, 2022 or September? Did it start September 2021? So the whole pandemic, Abbott Pandemic Defense Coalition collaboration with TEPHINET started in September, but we would like your projects to start in January.
There's also a question that came in once, if awarded the grant, is it the principal investigator as an individual or the host institution that receives and manages a grant? And the goal for this fellowship is that the principal investigator would be the recipient of that, would be responsible for providing a detailed budget if selected to advance in the process for how the funds would be utilized, and a monthly progress monitoring would be conducted as well. But feel free to reach out with via email with any additional questions about that. But our goal is to encourage principal investigators to independently lead their projects, of course, with support from the institutions that they would be collaborating with.
Great, thank you. And then it looks like Beatrice raised her hand. Beatrice, did you want to talk? I just unmuted you if you wanted to mention something. Oh, there we go. Okay, maybe not. In the meantime, we had a question also come through the chat. Can a person apply with 2 letters of intent with 2 different ideas? And no. all applicants are restricted to submitting one letter of intent. If you submit multiple, that results in disqualification. Okay, Beatrice, you're live. Did you have a question?
Yes, yes, please. Thank you so much, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. I also wanted to just find out, other than pathogen, your interest in pathogens, and you just mentioned that you are also interested in other conditions as long as they are of public health importance. Would you have an opportunity for non-communicable diseases? That's my concern. Thank you, and I submit.
Thank you.
I think we're really focused more on infectious diseases. I understand. Actually, there is some indirect work around infectious diseases and chronic diseases. For example, liver disease and hepatitis. That kind of work we could certainly consider looking at studies around that kind of element. So it's really about infectious diseases, but I think if there are some associations with it, there are some non-communicable diseases that we don't know much about, chronic fatigue syndrome, things like that. But I think, for example, looking at heart disease or diabetes or non-communicable disease with really that may not have a link to infectious diseases is not really the focus of our work.
But maybe if they were of unknown etiology, I can think of, we had a really interesting case out of Brazil. It looked like an outbreak of something in a jail, and it turned out that it was beriberi, which is a disease caused by a lack of certain vitamin. So it was non-communicable, but it was unknown, how it was presenting. So I think as long as you're focusing on these guidelines here, so, surveillance systems, that would be for pathogens. But if you were going to do a survey or case studies with patients with novel or unknown etiology, maybe it could be non-communicable.
And let me add something else, Elena. Beatrice, I know you have an interest on NCDs. This fellowship is not specifically on that, but we're working on other opportunities for our fellows to do work on NCDs as well. So don't feel discouraged about this. I think this is just a great opportunity for our fellows to work and do implement investigations based on the criteria we have developed with Abbott, but there are other opportunities for NCDs and they will come in the future. So just stay tuned for those. And we thank you for your interest as well.
We've got a lot of questions coming in. Okay, so Jean-Claude asks if it would be a good idea to do bacteriological monitoring together with antibiotic sensitivity for the neonatology department to identify bacterial agents and sensitivity.
Yeah, so again, our work, and of course, antimicrobial resistance is an incredibly important issue. And within that, you can certainly consider them emerging pathogens. We haven't been doing that kind of work. I don't think we would rule it out. But I would think, I'm just thinking out loud, just doing surveillance for AMR, I'm not sure would really fit the criteria. You'd have to give it a kind of a different twist or something, if you will. But it's not excluded, but it'd have to be carefully thought out, I think.
Great, thank you. And then can we support/strengthen already working surveillance? And Vicky's particularly interested in whole genome sequencing surveillance.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? I kind of missed it.
Sure. Can we support/strengthen already working surveillance? And the surveillance is whole genome sequencing surveillance.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a great way to work. If you already affiliated or have a system, diagnostic capability within the country, and I think that's great. And do they have a ready pool of specimens, something you can add to by doing surveillance for identifying appropriate case patients? So yeah, strengthening of existing systems is, I would say, encouraged as opposed to starting a de novo system, which is very hard to do in a short time.
For sure. Great, thank you, Francisco. And then Tiffany is not an FETP resident or trainee, but she is part of the APDC in Jamaica. Is she eligible?
Again, that would be, I think, more for you guys, right?
So I don't know if I understand. Is she part of the university who has been identified as the APDC site? I understand it that way, correct?
I can.
Oh yeah. Okay, Tiffany. Okay.
Unmute.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Tiffany, I'm gonna unmute you. Okay. So you can go ahead and tell us your situation.
If not, I have seen her answer. She said that she belongs to the institution, which I think is the university, right, Francisco? That you have the APDC site with the university.
Hello.
University of West Indies, is that what we're talking about? Yes, in Jamaica.
But not an FETP resident, either
Yeah, no.
currently or in the past.
Yes. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm sorry, there are meetings going on around me, so that's why.
I have a potential solution for you, Tiffany. The grant will go straight to the fellow. You know, we are trying to support our FETP programs. We have an FETP in the Caribbean, but I understand we have some advanced, intermediate grads and advanced grads potentially. I think you could be part of the research team, of the grant team, but not really the recipient of the grant. So if you want to support the investigation, together with a PI from the APDC site in the University of West Indies, you can, but not really the one who submits the application. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then also we have Dr. Tasnuva has a question. So I'll let you talk as well, so you can ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, doctor.
Thank you. I am Dr. Tasnuva from Bangladesh, FETP trainee, 7th batch. My question is there any possibility to work with existing surveillance system which is run in our country to identify new pathogen or emerging any disease, any pathogen?
I think absolutely, yes, that would be acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We also have another question in the chat. Is tuberculosis considered for this fellowship?
I think yes, I think the short answer is yes, it could be for sure.
All right, and then back to questions and answers. We have an FETP first year thinking of conducting a sero survey for hepatitis. There is a possibility of underreporting in his context. Is this an acceptable application?
I mean, what was that? Can you summarize that again?
Yeah, a sero survey for hepatitis, as there's a possibility of underreporting.
Yeah, there's always a possibility of underreporting or under ascertainment. I'm not sure what there has to be a research question. Okay, if you think about it, you draft a proposal with a research question. That a survey has a possibility of underreporting? Absolutely. We're not really doing, by the way, trying to assess surveillance systems. I know that that's a kind of a core training element of FETP and EIS and those programs. How do you assess, the sensitivity, specificity, representativeness, all that? We're not looking for a surveillance system evaluation. I think so. It has to be a research question beyond that. If that answers the question.
Great. Yes, I just summarized the answer there. Great. Well, we've got, looks like a lot of excited people in the chat. Beatrice said she's sending in her application. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. Do we have any other questions? So I can go back to the letter of intent instructions. Did we have any questions about how to prepare the letter of intent?
I did also want to quickly mention here, related to what Francisco had mentioned, when proposing your study, it can certainly have a research element, but to keep in mind that it should not involve human subject research, and that guidance again will be provided. Should you be selected for the next round. So just wanted to mention that as well.
Right. So yeah, we might talk about a research question, but that doesn't mean that this is like a research proposal.
Yeah, apologies. I didn't mean to go there with that.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah. It was a good segue, just to clarify. Yeah.
Great. So I think.
Yes, we're talking about more surveillance, right? That's what you're getting at, Laura. It's more of a surveillance kind of project, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Or and specimen banks, things like that. But yeah, not
Not a
typically
clinical trial or
correct,
anything like that. Yes, totally. Yes, it's much more observational surveillance kind of work.
Correct.
Right.
So I think this is a question that we didn't touch on. Thomas asked if he's an FETP student, does he need a letter from his FETP coordinator? And so if you're a student, current student, no, you do not, is my understanding.
He needs okay, I think that will be a question we have to clarify. He needs the institutional support, as Francisco said. And so the institutional support will be at this time the FETP program director. And since our FETPs belong to the Ministry of Health in the majority of cases, or the National Public Health Institute, it means that they have the backing of the ministry somehow, right? So yes, you need a letter of support from your FETP program director if you are a trainee.
Yes. So basically, you just need any kind of letter of support. It can be from the Ministry of Health, National Public Health Institution, academic institution, but we understand that most of the time your FETP will be affiliated with one of those. So you can get a letter from your FETP, but you do need some kind of letter of support.
Yeah, and I think that would be, I mean, it would be odd, I would think, if someone is in an FETP program and was working totally outside of their director and advisor. I think it would be important that they be linked in and supportive of this work, really.
And to get the permissions to conduct the project. So it's important. If you're a grad, obviously permissions from your program director are not needed, but to be able to access the data, you need institutional support. So if you're working for the Ministry of Health, you need a letter of support from your supervisor, somebody in the ministry, to provide that backing. If you're working with the Ministry of Agriculture, that will be, so it depends on which institution you are working on. And that is important to show us that you have permissions, you have support, and the data, you have access to the data or any specimen banks or anything you're using for your project.
Yeah, that's a great point, Angela. Related to that, having all of that in place so that your project can begin in January is essential. And that's something that we will be keeping in mind when we review to ensure that your proposed study is able to begin on time and can be completed within the time frame of this award cycle.
Yeah, and also the ability to, or at least to explore the ability to export specimens if needed to either one of the other sites or to Abbott. And we would help with that transport of specimens, of course, but you have to, if you don't have the ability to do the testing in country, you have to have at least documented that, yes, you've explored that it is possible to do this, and you have places to store the specimens and things like that.
So will the letters of support not be from the FETP resident advisors, or will the letter from the institution suffice?
I could answer that. I think the letter from the institution is the most important piece, and not really from your resident. Could be, well, depends. Sometimes the resident advisors play a very huge role, but sometimes, depending on how your program is structured, it will be better coming from your program director, which I suppose that means your institution rather than the resident advisor. That is just my opinion. That depends on who is the person who can support either giving you permissions to conduct this research or this activity, I will call it research, and provide you with the support for data collection, data gathering, and so on, and storing whatever you are doing. So the institution, I think it's the most important, and I will be represented by your program director rather than your resident advisor.
I wanted to go over quickly because I only have a few more minutes, just the actual logistics of how to apply. You do have to create a profile on the TEPHINET website. So the instructions are here. You have to log into the TEPHINET website with your TEPHINET account. If you don't have one, you must register. And then, as Amber put in the chat a few minutes ago, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write to secretariat@tephinet.org, and we can help you get your profile set up. But it is very important that you create a profile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would just add to, if you have a profile, like if you've applied for a grant before and it's been a long time and you just don't know your password or you need a password reset, you can email us there too, because I know that comes up a lot for people.
Yeah. Thanks, Amber. And also, now that we've extended the deadline for the LOIs to October 31st, those who are selected to submit a full proposal, once we review those LOIs, you could expect to be notified by November 15th. And we'll be sure to include that information on the website as well.
So we have, Jakob has a question. If you'd like, you can just put it right in the chat and we're answering questions there. Vijay has a very long question. Let me try to read this all out. Will there be any support from Abbott in providing testing kits for some rare diseases? So he has a few in mind, such as Hanta or CCHF virus or KFD, and would like to use some archive samples collected for a COVID national serosurvey. So would Abbott provide support for testing these diseases? Also, does he have to know the price of the kits that he wants to use for the screening for the letter of intent? Like, should he start putting dollar amounts?
Yeah, so just to be clear, I mean, in terms of specific infections like that, there's two ways to approach it. One is with testing kits specifically, or another is through discovery. Sometimes when you're doing discovery, you find known pathogens. In fact, that happens more often than not because people don't have kits for everything. So whatever way we would work with the applicant for that. So either have kits available, make kits available, or do discovery to identify what the pathogen may or may not be. And yes, we would support that. Was that the rest? Was there any more to that question?
No. And the dollar amounts. Should he start thinking about?
No. I think that would be on our side to ensure that there's the specimens are tested for properly. What country is that from, by the way?
India.
India. Okay, so we do have a site in India that we work with. So yeah, I think that would be an interesting potential application, depending on what the specimens are that are stored. You know, were they from people with acute disease, or were they, again, blood bank specimens? I don't think would necessarily be appropriate for that kind of testing necessarily.
The other thing I will encourage as well, Francisco, now that we have an APDC site in India, is for the applicant. What is the name? Sorry, BJ, I think.
BJ, yeah.
To maybe have a link with the APDC PI or focal point and discuss your study. So what you're trying to do and kind of refine the objectives of it. That will help you with the brainstorming as well. And since that is a requirement to work with the APDC side, you can see what type of lab support you can get, mentorship support. So I will encourage you to reach out to the APDC side and start, bouncing ideas back and forth to put a stronger application together.
Yes, and if I could just to add to that, in fact, we strongly encourage you to develop your proposals with a mentor, with somebody who understands epidemiology, who understands public health, infectious diseases. We don't want you to be just, this is a training program. You don't have to just come with your own, most clever idea in the world. We want you to do it in collaboration with the collaborators and the experienced researchers in the country. So thank you for bringing that up, Angela. And I'd like to really emphasize that point, is to be sure you're in line with, not just that you have sort of permission or a letter of support to do work, but it's specific to the grant you have and that they are interested in it, that's important and want to collaborate with you on that study or that project, that study.
Yeah. So also just as a reminder, this is just the first step, just the letter of intent. So this is just sending us a letter that you are interested. So that's all you have to have at this point. So just make sure, like Francisco was saying, that you start establishing these connections, you get their support and you send it, but the full proposal will come later. If we have determined that your letter of intent is sufficient, then we'll ask you to submit the whole proposal. So the most important thing right now is just getting your letter together and sent in the next 2 weeks. And then Francisco, can you remind us of the sites in Africa? We have another question about what would be the closest one to Nigeria. So I know you said South Africa has a wide network and they're, the whole continent. You're starting one in Uganda. There's one in Senegal.
Right. It's IRESSF in Senegal. I forgot what the initials stand for, but you can Google it and find it. And we're just moving over to a new institution in South Africa, in Cape Town, and the name is passing me by, but I can get those names to people too, and the contacts. Specifically, we can get you the contacts. In fact, we can make that available to you all at TEPHINET. Maybe we'll make the contacts available, and then you can just share that with the applicants.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we're going a little bit over time now. We've been here for about an hour. I think it's probably time for us to wrap up. But yes, we have been recording this presentation and we'll share it. Hopefully we'll be able to post it to YouTube or share it with our network. And yeah, any last questions or comments? No, we're really looking forward to all these applications. And as we mentioned, this is really just the letter of intent. So please just show us your intention of applying, and then the actual in-depth proposal will come later. And we're definitely here to support you every step of the way. And yes, Thomas, we will be sharing the recording. But yeah, as mentioned, you can reach out to, sorry, Laura, can you remind me of the email, the small grants email? It's small grants program.
Sure, yeah, it should be on the website. It's sgp@tephinet.org. I'll put it in the chat as well.
Yeah, I can put it. So that's for anything related to small grants programs. So you can send that to us. Also, any general TEPHINET questions is the secretariat@tephinet.org. So it's secretariat@tephinet.org. So that's if you have any issues signing on to your profile. Yeah, and also we're on Tephi Connect, LinkedIn, all of those social medias. So just reach out to us any way you can if you have any questions, because we're really looking forward to it.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice. We really are looking forward to this collaboration. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with you all.
Yeah. Best of luck to everybody.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.